parents know and do to ameliorate the situation for their children, to protect their children, or wise them up on time?
It's a very good question, Teresa. It's a very good question. And for my book, I've been working with teenagers in many capacities in different parts of the work that I do, and for nearly 20 years. And I noticed in the last, say, 6 years, there was a huge shift in what teenagers were presenting with, the issues that they were coming into my clinic with. And when I was preparing to write this book, I went around to about 25 schools in Ireland, and I carried out a bit of data. I interviewed, every year in the school, and then I talked to the parents afterwards, and I'd give them advice and feedback on what I heard in the interviews and the classes that I was having with the students. And one of the first things, how I'd start off all of my interviews and my talks with the students, I'd say to them, "What piece of information don't you want me to give to your parents about gaming?" And they'd say, "Please, Richard, don't tell them to take the games out of the room." Right. And I'd say, "Oh, that's very good." And every class pretty much said the same. And when I started the talk with the parents, I'd say to them, "Now, I'm just giving you a bit of feedback. Your children have begged me not to tell you, take the games out of the rooms. So now what you do is you take the games out of the room." And I'd say that's a really important part of managing gaming, because when they're up in their bedroom, they're unable to manage themselves. Some students, of course, some kids will be able to manage themselves. The majority of them won't, because when they take a device into their hand, Teresa, when they've got a multiplayer, multifaceted game like Fortnite or whatever it is, it's so powerful, they won't be able to manage and regulate their own activity on it.
They're sucked in.
Well, they're so immersive, you see. Sure. And then this is where I would see my work as a family psychotherapist. If you put a rupture in peer group there, or you put a rupture in the family, or a family that's separating, or a kid who's having a difficulty in school, or the game is just the perfect device, conduit for them to escape reality and go into it, because it's designed to be immersive. And the World Health Organization in 2018 classified it as a new mental health condition. And so the DSM-5, the recent DSM Diagnostic Statistics Manual, has it pending. And this is where I get scared. And this is what really prompted me to write this book, is where I see this going. The logical conclusion of all this is that the DSM-6 will have it as a mental health condition. And then you'll have a rollout of a pharmacological response to gaming. And then you'll have kids being medicated because of the gaming habit, whereas it's a parental issue.
Considering, right? When you consider that 18-month-olds, 2-year-olds in some parts of the States are on Ritalin.
Of course.
And if you project your thoughts forward in a parallel,
it's a dystopian trajectory, to think about medicating your kids along this, when all it takes is actually bringing in a sensible policy and bringing in boundaries. As in my book, you can see I go through all the different types of boundaries, and the one that to me stands out as a boundary that allows your child to be a part of the family and separate from it, that they feel a part of the boundaries, that they're helping you write the boundaries, that everybody's got the buy-in for it. Of course, kids will always test your boundaries, but the boundaries must always hold. I mean, they're not going to be too rigid. If a kid hits a boundary and it just stays like this, it's too much for them. A boundary must move slightly and come back into place. And so when your kid is 4, 5, 6, 7, that's when you really get the boundaries written so they understand how to follow them. So when they're a teenager, I meet teenagers 15, 16, generally about 15, and the parents are going, "We cannot manage this kid." Sure. And I'm looking at it and saying, "Well, how have you managed him coming through?" And they're like, "Well, he never had any consequences. There was no ramifications for his behavior." And now you got a 15-year-old, and it's like that line in The Sopranos. I was watching The Sopranos recently, and Tony Soprano says to his wife, who's a mafia boss, about his daughter, "If she figures out we've no power, we're finished here." Right?
I know.
And that's the thing.
We get training for so many aspects of our lives. There's no requirement for any training for parenting.
No, there's not. And it's a constantly evolving landscape.
Absolutely. So you talk about parenting styles. What in your practice do you note is the pervasive parenting style at the minute?
Probably inconsistent parenting. To be honest, yeah, what I would see a lot of, and I think this impacts women probably more than men, is parenting from a position of guilt. I think women, especially in Ireland, give themselves an incredibly difficult, they speak to themselves really harshly. I think they're incredibly critical of their parenting because they probably, traditionally when they were growing up, let's say society was constructed a certain way that perhaps the mother stayed at home and the father went out and worked. And so they recall their own childhood, and that all bit of comparison is the thief of joy. And they think about their mother being there all the time, and they weren't probably sent to a creche. But the modern world has changed irrevocably. I mean, it's remarkably different than any time that we've ever had to parent before. I mean, both parents generally have to go out to meet the financial demands that's placed on us. A house, to buy a house now is an incredibly, big expense. I mean, it's just phenomenal, the expense, especially, in Ireland, Dublin and these places. But so parents, I think, often because they're busy during the week, especially I think women at the weekend, they can feel that guilt. And when the child asks for something, they acquiesce and they give in because they come to the error and they're thinking that that's a good, they're overcompensating. And what they do then is they develop a sense of expectancy in the child, and the child becomes a little bit more difficult, and the child wants more and more and more and more. And to satiate that, they give more, and the more you give, the more they want. And so you're setting yourself up for a very uncomfortable teenage year with your child when they have an expectancy that the world will move around them and the world will shape them, and there's no consequences for their behavior and there's no ramifications for their bad behavior. I think you're launching off into the world then a very unhappy child and a very unhappy young adult who will find the relational life very difficult because they've never known how to compromise. And what I'd see clinically is often couples coming in before they get married, and it's almost like the woman's bringing the man in to reparent him because he's never had to be parented. He was never parented because his mother, and I hear the same stories all the time, Teresa, my mom gave me everything, I never had to do anything, and dad was just kind of like passive, and mom
kept the reins.
Yeah, mom was kind of the one who gave me everything I wanted, and I never had to compromise, and I was always able to not do my homework if I didn't want to, or if I needed this, I got this. So they've never developed the skill. They've never developed the skill to rely on themselves, so they're not resilient, and they don't know how to compromise. And you see them in a relationship really struggling.
Is there a space there for making it attractive for young mothers to parent the children for those critical years and launch them out into the workplace, and then launch them out into school life, etc., and then return to work themselves? I know you've some young mothers are very ambitious, etc., for their own careers, but it's a fine balance that's not possible to really attain. The serving both masters, serving that the demands of motherhood, serving the demands of a fast-paced workplace, and etc. But our government don't seem to make it easy.
Well, I suppose I don't think it should rely on the mother to have to do that. I think our society should be more advanced, where we can think about the father being able to take time off at work. And I think there's that hidden bit of society that we think we're very equal, and we think there's great equity out there. We've moved massively, but I think the old paradigms are probably still running underneath everything. And that, I think what I've noticed in the pandemic is it's illuminated the inequity that exists. And I think the pressures placed on women were really many over the last 40 months, caring for their elderly parents and minding the home and keeping everything going, doing their job, homeschooling. I mean, it just really illuminated all that. And I think it's about time that we really, as a society, address that. And if a mother wants to have a career, she should be able to have a career, and she shouldn't feel guilty about that. And that's the work I do. You shouldn't feel guilty for the work you do. Society is different. And if you want to have, I don't think it's ambitious to think, to want a career. I think that's just something that we should all have, yeah, exactly.
So it's shared parenting and getting the balance right with a little bit of help from.
And I think women really struggle with saying no. And I think women, and it comes out of, when I look at it, Teresa, it comes out of the old paradigm of being the good daughter, the good child, right? I think that's a really destructive paradigm. I'm the good daughter. I do all the good. I mean, that's a great way to get someone to be motivated and to do things for you. You're always the good daughter there, Teresa. You're a great daughter, and you go off and you do everything, right? But it puts incredible, pressure.
So they're even there. I often think they have a harder time than previous generations in the multitasking.
Oh my God, incredible pressure on women. I think there's incredible pressure on women at the moment, and I think on men as well. I think because men, I suppose, don't understand what their position is anymore. I suppose that's kind of not a concrete thing either. So they're trying to, maybe on quicksand, trying to figure out where the hell do they stand.
I think they're adjusting to the.
I think they're adjusting.
Power of woman coming up as well. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. And I think society has changed, and I think, it's changing. I don't think it's there yet, but I think it's changing. And I suppose in all that change, you're going to get people trying to cling on to the status quo and the old ways of being.
You use a phrase repeatedly in your book, be by your child's side, not on it. I think it catches it all.